For centuries, Rome stood as the heart of the ancient world. Its armies stretched from the sands of Africa to the shores of Britain. Its language, laws, and roads shaped a civilization that lasted 1,000 years. But even the mightiest empires are not eternal. They rise, and eventually, they fall. Tonight, we journey back to the twilight of Rome to trace how such a powerful empire slowly faded into memory. The decline of the Roman Empire was not sudden. It did not fall in a single year or with one great battle. Instead, it was a long, quiet erosion, political, military, economic, and cultural. Cracks formed over centuries, and eventually, the weight became too great for even Rome to bear. In the late 3rd century, Emperor Diocletian made a bold decision. Believing the empire too vast to govern as one, he divided it into two halves. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Byzantium, and the Western Roman Empire, centered in Rome, and later Ravenna. This split was meant to bring stability, but in time it would only deepen the divide. While the East flourished, its capital, Constantinople, growing into a jewel of the Mediterranean, the West began to struggle. Plagued by corruption and weak leadership, the Western Empire lost the strength that had once defined it. Emperors came and went with dizzying speed. Some ruled for years, others only days. Few held the loyalty of the army. Fewer still had the will to lead. At the borders, Rome faced growing threats. Germanic tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Franks, once considered barbarians, were now powerful nations in their own right. Pressed by hunger, war, and the movement of other tribes like the Huns, they began to push into Roman lands, sometimes as invaders, sometimes as refugees. In 376 AD, the Visigoths crossed the Danube, seeking refuge from the Huns. Rome allowed them to settle, but mistreatment led to rebellion. In 378, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Roman army suffered a crushing defeat. Emperor Valens was killed. The Eastern Empire reeled, but survived. The West, however, began to wobble. Then came the unthinkable. In 410 AD, the Visigoths, led by King Alaric, sacked the city of Rome. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City fell to an enemy army. The world was stunned. Pagans blamed the abandonment of the old gods. Christians saw it as a test of faith. But all agreed, Rome was no longer invincible. As the decades passed, more tribes entered Roman territory. The Vandals crossed into North Africa and captured Carthage, cutting off vital grain supplies. The Huns, under Attila, terrorized the Balkans and Italy. The Franks began to settle in Gaul. Rome, once the master of all, was now negotiating, bribing, and retreating. Internally, the empire was rotting. The once mighty legions were underfunded and poorly trained. Many soldiers were now hired mercenaries, loyal not to Rome, but to their pay. The Senate, once the brain of the Republic, had become ceremonial. The emperors were often figureheads, controlled by powerful generals or palace officials. One such general was Flavius Aetius, sometimes called the last of the Romans. He managed to rally a coalition to defeat Attila the Hun at the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains in 451 AD. It was a fleeting moment of glory. A few years later, Aetius was murdered by Emperor Valentinian III, who was then killed himself soon after. The chaos deepened. In 455 AD, Rome was sacked again, this time by the Vandals. Unlike the Visigoths, who had looted selectively, the Vandals stripped the city clean. They took art, treasure, and even the Empress Licinia Eudoxia as a captive. The word vandalism would later be born from this brutal raid. By the late 470s, the Western Empire was barely holding together. Provinces were lost. Armies were loyal to warlords, not Rome. In 476 AD, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus. No great battle marked the end. No trumpet sounded. Rome had simply stopped. The Eastern Empire, known later as the Byzantine Empire, would carry on for nearly another 1,000 years. But the Western Roman Empire, the one of Caesar, Augustus, and Trajan, was gone. It had collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions, greatness and decay, living side by side for too long. And yet, the legacy of Rome endured. Its language, Latin, would shape Italian, French, Spanish, and other modern tongues. Its legal codes would inspire generations of lawmakers. Its roads would still guide travelers centuries later. And its memory of order, of empire, of glory would echo through the ages. Medieval kings called themselves Caesars. Churches borrowed Roman architecture and Latin scripture. Even today, Rome lives on in our calendars, our politics, our art, and our imagination. It reminds us that even the greatest civilizations are fragile. That strength, once taken for granted, can fade, and that history is a long and patient storyteller. The fall of the Roman Empire wasn't a moment. It was a slow and quiet ending, like the last glow of a dying fire. But from its ashes rose new kingdoms, new cultures, and a new world. The story of Rome's fall, in truth, was the beginning of something else. The dawn of medieval Europe and the long road toward the modern age. So tonight, as you rest, let your thoughts wander to the marble halls of Rome, now empty. To the quiet roads once filled with soldiers and merchants, to the whispers of emperors long gone. The empire may have fallen, but its story will always remain.